Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry, Pollock, Alison, McConnell and Cara Henderson join me here this morning. An action-packed weekend to kick us off in the SWPL with some high scorelines, and let's start with Celtic then, Alison. Flag day in style for Alina Sidiku's side.
Indeed, I think they put down the gauntlet to everyone else on Saturday. A really comfortable, assured display. Really 9-0. There probably could have been more. I think they hit the woodwork twice. I think very, very comfortable. And then, of course, go into Sunday and you get an immediate response from Hearts, from Rangers, from Glasgow City, who all clocked up big, high-scoring games to, I think, 48 goals scored across the league in its opening weekend, which is interesting. I think maybe there's a talking point to be had there about the optics of such big scorelines and maybe what the reflections that gives you to the league, but certainly from the perspective of the teams who are scoring them, their consideration is banking points, clocking up the goal difference, and it's like first game of the season, you can already see there's a very clear vision about what the title race may mean with given consideration to how it ended last season. Yeah,
Cara, as Alison highlighted there, is that going to be a priority for teams this season to get as many goals on the score sheet as you can, considering it went down to that last season?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously last season showed how important it is to be ruthless in front of goal, and they've obviously, all the top teams have started, hopefully not as they mean to go on, but it looks like, they've all added strength, and those are pretty convincing scorelines.
And it was 11-0 to Rangers against Aberdeen. What sort of mentality is required, Alison, when you're now chasing the title rather than defending? I'll get Cara's take on that as well, obviously.
I think for the likes of Rangers, Glasgow City and Celtic, I think it probably doesn't waver too much. I don't think it changes hugely. I think all three, certainly across the last 3-4 seasons, have all vied for the title. Rangers won it fairly comfortably a couple of seasons back, but by and large it always tends to become a fairly photo finish, as we have seen 2 seasons ago, Glasgow City winning it with almost the last kick of the ball at Ibrox and taking the title away from Celtic. Celtic thought they'd had it last season, Celtic winning it again, 90th minute winner from Amy Gallagher delivers a title courtesy of a goal. A single goal was the only difference there. So I think the challenge remains the same. I think for these top three, it's about a very clear sight on the title. Glasgow City, I think, have been very quiet this summer in terms of how they've gone about their business. I think they have strengthened on and off the pitch. I think the infrastructure around the club has been building up, but as well they've brought in personnel that I think have given them a more clinical edge. I think what cost them last season was maybe a failure to kill off teams, just too many draws at key points in the season, just maybe not putting teams to the sword when they should have been. I think you can see, even just from the opening game of the season, that's been given clear consideration over the summer. I think Leanne Ross spoke about it yesterday when she said what you've seen in that performance and in this team is that we carry a real attacking threat, and I think it's going to be key. I think what you'll see are Celtic, Rangers, City, Hearts too, pushing to try and break that stranglehold of the top three, but what you'll see is them pushing now to really not take their foot off the gas in games. I think if there are a couple of goals to the good, it won't be sitting back and knowing and seeing the game out. It will be keep your foot to the floor, keep going and get as many goals as possible. And I don't know how ominous that may seem for other teams, particularly when you look at the bottom half of the table. And we discussed the optics of that, but certainly from the consideration of those teams, it will be about as many goals might be needed. It might not just be points that determine the title.
Definitely. Do you think we'll see a different animal in the likes of Rangers and Glasgow City this season, Cara?
Yeah, I think there is a difference between defending and chasing a title. I think that there's obviously more pressure that comes with an expectation that comes when you're the champions, but if I'm being honest, I think there's so little to sort of distinguish between the top three that I think it will just come down to who can get the job done against sort of, as you said, cutting out draws. Obviously last year when Rangers drew with us, little things like that probably don't seem like that big of a deal, but then come the end, those are the sort of fine margins.
I think when there's such consistency between the top three, when there's such consistency that points dropped can be huge, and you saw it towards the end of last season, Rangers dropping points to Hearts, just going into the run-in actually cost them the title. That game, you could go back and look at that game, and I know you could then say you drew with Celtic too in the latter stages, but that game was pivotal to how the title played out, and I think that will be key this season. I think they know there is so little margin for error among the top three. But it's interesting because this Sunday you've got Glasgow City and Celtic going head to head right away. I think if anything gives, it opens the door to Rangers just putting their noses in front a little bit, or if one of them comes out as a victor, again, just edging in front. And even at this early stage of the season, I think that can be significant.
Well, let's just have a look at the results from the weekend and remind ourselves what went on there. We had Aberdeen, of course, 0, Rangers 11, Celtic 0, Celtic 9, Dundee United 0, Montrose 0, and Glasgow City 7, Partick Thistle 1, Hibernian 2, Queen's Park 1, Hearts 11, Spartans 1, and Motherwell 5. Let's have a look at the Hearts game then, Cara. 11-1 to Hearts. Was that unexpected? Did you see that scoreline coming on that game?
No, probably. I think, I know Joyce well, I know Ian well, who are the sort of manager and assistant manager there, and they know how to set up a team, so it probably shows how good Hearts are rather than, Queen's Park being poor, because they've got a lot of really good players. And I suppose as well it's always tough coming up, it's not an easy first game for your first game in the SWPL 1, so as I said earlier, pretty convincing from Hearts. Shows how much quality they've probably added, because I think that was them without Bailey Hutchinson even yesterday, which adds her to that, and you're probably getting even more goals. So I think it's a sort of harsh welcome, but I don't think it's a fair reflection on how Queen's Park will be. I think they'll be a pretty good side going forward.
Bit of a baptism of fire, some might say, Alison, to make that step up. Just how big is that? We talk about the top of the SWPL 1 league. Just how difficult must that be coming up from the SWPL 2?
I think it's huge. I think you've seen it across recent seasons that teams coming up struggle to come in and stay in and make an impact and move away from the bottom half. I think there is a huge chasm that exists between the top three. It's almost as if you have 3 leagues within a league almost. I think you have the top 3 who are significantly out in front. Then you have Hearts and Hibs and Thistle too across the last 2 seasons, just punching above their weight really. And then you have everyone else. But I think there is a danger that the top 3 accelerate away again, that the chasm becomes bigger. I think it'll be interesting to see if that is true this season. I know Hearts, I've spent quite a considerable amount of money in trying to bridge it. They've put a lot of effort into Eva Olid's seasons, have improved year on year. Every season that she's been in charge, she's taken them a step further. They got to the Scottish Cup final last season. I think she'll be keen to try and knock on that door, but I do think that they're just so far out in front of everyone else. And I think for any team coming up, I think there is a real awakening of just what the difference is in standard, because it's huge.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Cara, let's move on to your game. Not the best of start for the season. What happened in your eyes?
I think it was disappointing, to be honest. I think the first half especially was just, we didn't give a good account of ourselves, and then we obviously come in at half time 1-0. At that point nobody's out of game, and then we go 2-0 down, and then you see a really good reaction from the girls for the last half hour. Emma scores a great goal, good play, and she finishes it off really well, and then for the last 30 minutes we're pushing, and to be honest we probably should have got an equaliser. We had a few chances that we hit the bar. We had a couple of other chances that probably just the final sort of ball or pass and we're getting in, and so you can't give any team probably in this league a 2-0 start, but especially not Hibs. And I think we learned a lot. There are some positives to take, but overall probably a disappointing start. But it's the first game of the season, so we can't dwell on it at all. We just need to keep going, and I'm sure we'll rectify that result later on in the year.
And it was you finished just 4 points behind Hibs last season. Is that one of the targets this time round, to bridge that gap?
It's got to be for us. I think that we showed in that last half hour that we can match them. They've obviously added a lot of players into that squad, and we more than matched them. And we didn't do that long enough. That's why we got beaten. But I think that has to be our target. We've got to get top 6 again, which won't be easy. I think definitely there'll be a target on our heads now of getting it 2 years in a row. I think other teams will want to catch us, but we have to look above, and we have to keep going, because as we said earlier, we don't want there to be gaps between us all. We want it to be as competitive as we can, and I think we showed yesterday, Hibs are a full-time team, and we ran them very close yesterday, and I think on another day we can get more out of that game than we did.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Cara highlighted, Alison, those results against Rangers, as you said, Celtic, it can mean something at the end of the season when it goes to, for instance, goal difference. Yeah,
absolutely. I think particularly when the split takes place towards the end of the season, I think it's a hugely competitive environment, top and bottom. I think it's a league where if you want to be successful in it, there's just not a huge room, there's not a huge margin for error at all.
Do you see there being an underdog in the top 3 this season as we start?
I think Glasgow City might consider themselves a quiet underdog. I think we all know the mentality around the club. You know, they were serial winners for so long. They dominated the Scottish women's football landscape for so long. I think the perception externally may be that Celtic and Rangers and the affiliation that they have obviously to Goliaths of the men's game maybe gives them different resources and access to resources that Glasgow City might not have. So I think the perception may be that they accelerate beyond and almost dominate the way that the men have dominated the men's top flight. I'm not sure that Glasgow City will be quite ready for that to happen. I think they have been very quiet this summer, but I think some of the additions that they have made, I think will make a real impression on the league. I think there was an aggression about them yesterday in the win over Montrose. I thought that was absent for long periods last season, and I think Lisa Evans going back is huge. She's only 32. Still got quite a good bit of time to play. Hugely experienced player, has played at the very highest level. She's mouthy too, she's opinionated. I think having players in the dressing room like that is crucial, particularly for Glasgow City. She knows the club inside out, obviously began her career there, is now going back. Scott Booth going in as Leanne Ross's assistant is an interesting one too. The dynamics of that is interesting. You know, a former manager going back as a coach, and I think Leanne and Scott Booth are both quite opinionated, can both be quite spiky. It'll be interesting to see what the dynamics are of that. But I think Glasgow City have been very quiet this season about rebuilding, bringing in players that I think the initial impressions of are good. I think they look as though they've strengthened their hand. I think you could look and say that they'll be one of the underdogs this season.
And just on that, as on last season, Glasgow City suffered a number of injuries as well that cost them on a few games. How key are those moments to lose those key players that could be really affect you by the time it comes to the end of the season?
Yeah, I think the sort of small margins will really come into play this year, like dropped points. You know, if there's injuries at key times that causes you to drop points in games, like we're talking about it, in a draw, which is not even the worst result, cost teams like the league last season. So I think it is really the small details with a lot of these teams, but I also would say that they seem to all have really sort of strengthened depth, this summer. So it's hard because obviously they lose Lauren Davidson, but they've got in Lisa Evans now. So it's hard, but I do think it will come down to the small details, like if you're missing key players in a big game like a Rangers Celtic, even at the weekend Celtic, Glasgow City. I do think that is important.
I think you saw it last season, they brought Fiona Brown back at Christmas time, and then she got the ACL. I think she could have been. I think she would have made the difference to them in the run-in. I think a huge player to lose Brenna Oliveira too, out for a significant period. I think Glasgow City were very unlucky last year with both the nature of injury, very serious injuries at critical points in the season, and I think what you've seen this season though is a real attempt to restructure that side, to bring in attacking threats and to offer a bit of strength and depth. I think they look like a stronger team this season.
Absolutely. Well, we're hoping that the weeks bring more action for us to look forward to. Thanks to Alison, thanks to Cara. On behalf of myself, thanks for listening and thanks for watching.